Hello, this is Mike at MFWoodShop. Today, I got a special treat for you guys. I contacted Inventables and they allowed me to come up and see them. I'm going to do a small interview with Zach Kaplan, the founder and CEO, and also I'm going to talk to Michael Una. So let's go check out Inventables and see what they're up to. Hello, this is Mike from MFWoodShop. I'm here with Michael Una. We are visiting Inventables today. He's going to show us around the facility a little bit and maybe catch up with Zach, the owner and CEO of the company. And so where do we start today, Mike?
This is our new sort of foyer as you walk in and our sort of open working area. So everybody kind of moves around based on what you're working on during the day. People sort of form little teams and kind of collaborate on something and they kind of break apart and work on something.
Okay. And what are you directly responsible for?
So I do all of our media production, photography. I do all our marketing, communications, social media. I run our YouTube channel. I work on our demo projects that we show. And I work on all the stuff like releasing new products like x-carve and carve. We did a Kickstarter campaign last year. We ran a Kickstarter campaign.
Okay. One of the questions I personally had was, what made Inventables go out to YouTube content creators to hand out the x-carves and even back at the Shapeoko days?
Sure. So yeah, that's a really good question. One of the things we find a lot is that it's hard to tell a story just about a machine. The machine sort of like really isn't the point. The point is what you can do with the machine.
Okay.
Right? It's the project that comes at the end, and that sort of finished like accomplishment, which is a collaboration between like you and the machine and your ideas and the materials and how that all comes together. That really kind of final piece is what the experience is really about. And so what we found is that we can make our own projects, we can make our own videos, we can try to tell the story of the machine, but it ends up being just kind of, the story only ends up being about our ideas and what we can make them.
Okay.
But what really actually inspires people and gets people's like ideas sort of turning in their mind is seeing people like you basically using our tools and materials to make awesome projects that they care about, that like you make because you wanted to make that project. And when that final project is finished, that tells part of the story.
Okay.
And so that's really kind of why we started working with YouTube people, because like you're in your wood shop, you make things every day. You have like your own ideas and goals and like kind of projects you're kind of working on and driving towards. And they're inspired by things like in your own life with ideas you want to tackle. And so it's much easier for us to work with people like you because you tell an awesome story about the things you like, that you care about, that you're passionate about.
So no pressure here, but who's your favorite YouTube content creator?
Oh man, that's really tough.
Woodworking or not?
Yeah, okay. You know, I gotta say my heart kind of goes to like Bob Claggett and David Picciuto, because they were the first ones who started using our stuff and making awesome things before I even knew they existed. I just sort of started seeing all these people started emailing Inventables, talking to us, like wanting to like try out Shapeoko and then x-carve themselves, just because those guys on their own, without even knowing it, got the machine, started working with it, and started making cool projects.
Absolutely.
So, and I talk to those guys all the time. They're awesome. They're super nice. They're really creative.
They really are.
I think it's like making it intuitive to design things that are going to be carved, and then the combination of that and like simplifying like all the steps that need to happen behind the scenes for your computer to talk to this machine that can move in 3 axes.
Okay.
So like trying to hide all that complexity from the end user, so that you just plug it in, design your project, and then click carve.
Okay. If they do their job right, you should not have many questions, because it just works.
Yeah, so what I've used so far, I mean, I think she's found more than I have already, and you know, she was like putting names all over the place. I was like, oh, cool.
So behind this door, which is always closed, but it's actually always open, is our customer service department. So anyone who has a question about the machine, about the software, about the materials we carry, and we get a lot of questions about all of those things, all goes to these guys. They're super awesome.
Yeah.
So they're probably pretty busy all the time then.
Oh, I see.
So is there
Yeah, so
a,
they should be straight down.
you still supporting the ship cookies?
Yeah, and so you can see, yeah, because we sold the
That's so
machine for
weird.
a long time.
So I
So
think I
we do
requested
support
to
on
send
those,
you
and
a
then
new
this one is an
one.
x-carve.
I think I followed
It's
your
already-
email.
Okay.
And they keep these nearby so that.
But could
When
you
they can
just
look
give
at
me
it,
a
find out
picture of it if it's easier on the
Makes
back
sense.
of the board? There
Makes sense.
should be.
Come on over. Some of our local manufacturer friends here in Chicago who make some different types of products, some cut pieces that all fit together in a sense. Our engineer Bart did this one for St. Patrick's Day,
That's cool.
anodized, and then walnut kind of combined together to make it like
Oh,
really
wow.
sharp. This is the rest of our arm. So this is where we do the rest of the website from. A couple of guys here. Ruman is working on some new features for easel. I'm guessing that's what Paul is working on too. Jules holds down the floor. It looks like she's working on some stuff for the 50 States program over there.
Cool.
I sit here and do all our website.
Okay.
So you can see we've got some stacks of new materials we're thinking about testing and using. Some real nice like sparkly acrylic.
Holy cow.
So we get samples in, kind of think about should we carry that? What do people
Holy
think? Would they
cow.
actually use that? Isn't that cool?
Like that.
It feels like it should be rough and
Yeah.
three-dimensional, but it's a solid piece.
That is really cool.
Yeah. All right, so we're down here on the second floor, and upstairs is sort of where we run the website from and kind of work on customer service and other stuff. Down here is the warehouse and workshop. What we try to do as new inventory comes in, its placement on the shelf is determined by how often those things are ordered. And so for people packing and shipping orders, they have to walk the least amount of distance to be able to pack. These are all different kinds of plastics, basically along this wall. One color like on the top surface, and then another color on the interior. So if you were to carve into that, you reveal the other color quickly, and then you can make some nice CPs that have like kind of cool colors. These are also food safe. Talked about this earlier today. These are linoleum blocks, right? And with x-carve, it's super easy to carve these out to make stamps. We just got some new stuff in. It's this kind of like digital camouflage.
Oh, cool.
And then again, it's like one color on one side and the other color on the other side.
So that'd be
signage on that.
perfect for like nameplates and stuff.
Nameplates, yeah, signage. And we have the green version, and we also have the red-pink version.
Gotta get the girls in there.
Yeah. We're coming along a little further. So we sell not only kits for full machines, but also all the individual components. So if you want to assemble your own machine out of these components to do whatever, automatic cake decorating machines, leather cutting machines, screws, bearings, washers, eccentric nuts. There are a lot of jokes you can make about eccentric nuts being around this warehouse. John's one of them. So we also carry, not everyone knows this, but a really interesting selection of plywoods and hardwoods. It's a really nice looking plywood, right? And that's not even finished. So it's pulled up in small quantities, and because it was already harvested a long time ago, you're not like cutting down trees to get it. Those trees are already cut. So
Awesome.
This is amazing old wood. So even this antique hard pine, it's pine, right? Sometimes you think of pine as being a lesser quality wood.
Right.
This is amazing wood. The grain pattern's very different than pine you get now. Flame retardant fabric with hot melt adhesive. Conductive elastic fabric. It's both conductive and elastic.
Oh, wow.
Stretch sensing rubber. These used to be popular in the 90s. Temperature sensitive flexible sheets.
It's a nude sheet.
Yeah.
Holy cow.
So this is our workshop. This is where we prototype and test new machines we have coming out. And we work on our own projects and kind of all get together and make stuff together. So you can see we have a lot of the traditional stuff: bandsaw, drill press, squirrel saw, sander, chop saw. You kind of need the basics around to kind of make different stuff.
Bud walking over this way a little bit. So these are the machines that we have out here, general use machines for everyone to use. Every employee here gets trained on how to use them. We also test out like kind of new different stuff we have working on. So we'll change out spindles. We'll do, one of our engineers is in here earlier. Wow, it's warm. This is a new air-cooled spindle. Thinking about, seeing how it works. What does it do? There's another one nearby. This is water-cooled.
Wow.
So you get water, input, output, electrical. This thing is so quiet, you don't even know it's running.
Really?
And it's got a good heft to it. It's pretty heavy, but this is a very powerful, very quiet spindle.
Wow. Is that still DC?
Yeah, it's DC. Yeah, and both these guys use a special motor spindle controller. So we test out a lot of things. Sometimes we end up carrying it, sometimes we don't. Sometimes we're like, this is gonna be too much work for us to really support. But we also found that we were making this mount for another type of spindle and it happened to fit these ones perfectly. So we're like, well, if we have this mount, how many spindles can fit in that mount? And then can we support those?
There you go.
And whether or not we end up carrying this in the store, we will say, well, we sell this mount. And then if you want to go buy the spindle, you can do that and put it on there. So we don't have to sell everything from the machine. You can do a lot of things yourself. Add on to it. That's part of the open source nature. Some of the working prototypes we have right now, this is Carve. So this was our Kickstarter campaign last year. We are steadily marching towards manufacturing spinning up right now, and we're going to be shipping this fall. So before we start shipping, one of Tate's jobs right now is to run 1 million tests on it, to figure out all the creative ways we can break it, and then engineer our way out of those, or put software stops in place or something to make sure customers are going to have a good experience. But Tate's been running some tests on some complicated 3D contoured objects.
Oh, wow.
So he's working on a pair of all wood eyeglasses.
Wow, that's cool.
That's coming out really nice, man. To say the all silver machine looks pretty cool.
I think I might like it more.
Yeah.
It's like calling it the bowling.
This is a pretty cool piece. So Tate made this a couple weeks ago. This is, it's a piece of wren shape. It's like foam that people use for a lot of like model making.
Okay.
And Tate put this stuff on, rub and buff.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a finisher, right?
Yeah.
So this is from a 3D scan of a tile that was pulled off a Lewis Sullivan building that was torn down in the 60s here in Chicago.
Really?
And guy who's a historical preservationist here in Chicago got one of the tiles, at auction or, and then he allowed a friend of ours at the Art Institute to 3D scan it and then posted the files online. We downloaded them and then just carved an exact replica of this tile.
So
and
this
then,
is foam?
yeah, so it's foam, a foam mold.
Okay.
Right? And then you glue up these layers and then put it inside a vacuum bag. Use a vacuum to remove all the air. It goes like this, right? And it sucks it down onto the mold.
Right.
Let it dry a couple days, overnight, whatever the process is.
Sure.
Comes out, sand off the edges a little bit, and then you're good to go. And then you get the perfectly molded like shape of the board. This is Zach
Kaplan.
Okay. He is the founder and CEO, is that right?
That's right.
Okay. And what made you come up with Inventables? How did this whole venture start?
Yeah, so when I was in high school, I got involved in a class that was called Sci-Tech. So the high school was going to get rid of the wood shop and the metal shop. And the shop teacher basically teamed up with a physics teacher and they got together like, well, this is kind of like high school engineering. And I took that class. I was one of the first years of them to do that, and I just got hooked ever since. So when I graduated from college, I was like, how can I do this kind of stuff professionally?
Awesome. Is that some of the inspiration of giving the x-carve to some of the schools recently?
Yeah, so we're trying to make all this stuff really accessible. When I was in high school, if you could imagine, the software was more complicated and the machines were more expensive. I was the kid who was sitting there frustrated because I couldn't, I wanted it to work like Microsoft Word or something. Right. And that's not how CAD, CAM, and machine control software is designed.
That's true.
And so, our mission here is we're trying to make it easy. We're trying to make it more accessible, both in terms of cost. So giving away for free helps enable that on easel and on the 50 States program. But then also just complexity. making it so you can kind of click around and draw or import and click the carve button and it just makes it.
Now, one of the, I don't know if I call it a quote or not, but one of the things I've seen, I think it was an interview with, I believe, Bob.
Okay.
You had mentioned that you like to take the idea from your head and put it in your hand.
Yeah.
Is that concept still valid today?
Yeah. So like actually, this I've been working on this Inventables sign. So it's two pieces there because you can see I screwed up the job. But and you could if you take that one down, you can see these are all the failures of the Inventables sign, like different iterations.
Yeah.
And then you see, oh, that one's missing the S because I ran out of travel. And then go back to this one, and you can see, and so you get the idea. Like this stuff's not easy.
Oh, absolutely.
And so, but the reason I saved all of them is because it's about iteration and learning by doing. I've learned the best by doing.
Right. And I think a lot of, at least my audience is the same way.
Yeah.
And I'm definitely the same way.
Okay.
I'm not a guy that reads a book and understands what's going on.
Yeah.
If I can play with it and do it, I'll probably get it eventually.
Yeah, eventually, yeah. But maybe it takes 10 Inventables logos.
Right. One thing I was looking for, and when I talk to other YouTube content creators and other woodworkers, see the word or the letter CNC always comes up.
Yeah.
But when I was actually doing a little bit of research to come here today,
Yeah.
CNC is not on your website very much.
That's right.
Why not CNC and why carve?
Yeah, so we think about it in terms of 3D carving. So we're actually, I have did a little research on this topic, like where did CNC even come from? And so it turns out that it wasn't always called CNC. Before it was called NC, and before that it was called cartomatic milling.
Oh, really?
So yeah, John T. Parsons' company in 1949 invented what they called cartomatic milling, which was before computers, they had the punch cards.
Okay.
And it was like an IBM 24, 25, something like that. And they had all the cards and they would like go,
Oh,
and
yeah.
the numbers on the cards would tell the machine where to go. And at that time, the machines were about $1 million, like the milling machines were about $1 million. And the only people that could afford that was obviously the government. And they were using it for the war effort. So they were making propeller blades, and he asked one of his guys, can you make a table of the number positions of where it should be? The guy's like, okay. And he like made a table, and they fed it into the cards. So the reason that it moved away from cartomatic to NC, which stands for numerical control, is a couple of years later, they lost the contract with the government because MIT won it. So the funding dried up, and now MIT had the funding, so then MIT called him, and he had to go to MIT to work on the same project. And the professor didn't like cartomatic milling, thought that was a little cheesy. So they ran a contest to say, how can we rename this technology? And a student at MIT won $50 for the name numerical control because it sounded more academic. A couple more years later, computers come out, and then they add the C to the beginning of it. So we were out a couple years ago at a bunch of the trade shows like South by Southwest and Maker Faire, and we have the machine on the table, and we say this is our CNC, and the reporter and the kids say, no, that's a 3D printer. And I was like, no, it's a CNC, and they're like, you just don't know what you're talking about, it's a 3D printer. So, that sort of sets up this conversation, like, it's a 3D printer, it's a CNC, and like, they just don't believe you, and everybody kind of gets that. So then, during the trade show, we're like, this is a 3D carver. And they're like, oh, like a 3D printer. We're like, yes. And so a couple things, so I started thinking about like what's going on there. And one is CNC is actually an outdated term, because if you think about a laser cutter is a CNC, a 3D printer is a CNC, a milling machine connected to computers is a CNC. So all of these things are CNC, so we're misusing the term CNC, where a 3D printer or a laser cutter or a 3D carver is actually a more domain-specific description of what the machine's doing. So we started basically calling it a 3D carver for two reasons. One, because it's more specific, and I think it's time to move on from CNC. But two, because we want to make it more accessible to other people, and even after you sit down and explain this is a CNC, they're like, what? Computer numerical control? Like, where are the numbers coming in? Can I just make my sign?
Right.
And so that's where we went back to 3D Carver. So we actually have a book coming out where I have sort of a longer version of that story with Make later this year. Yeah.
Awesome. And I didn't know that. That's news to me. Another question I got is after a hobbyist would buy a standard x-carve or shape oak or whatever, what would be the first upgrade piece that you would put on that thing, and why?
Yeah, so I would upgrade the spindle. So we've been looking at different spindle options. So like right now, the x-carve is shipping with an entry-level spindle, and it's great if you're just trying to get going and understand what's going on. And then from there, like the world is your oyster and just goes up. Obviously, with going up in performance, goes up in cost.
Sure.
And so what we were trying to do is just make it approachable when you don't know what you're doing. It doesn't matter if you have like the Mercedes of spindles.
That's true.
And so one of the ones we've been looking at, so we've been got the DeWalt 660. Then this week we're going to launch a mount for the DeWalt 611. And then beyond that, we're looking at water-cooled or air-cooled VFD spindles, which are just as powerful, maybe more powerful than some of the DeWalts, but quieter. So yeah, awesome. you can get a lot of performance benefit by upgrading your spindle.
Okay. A little bit more research into the x-carve just on my end.
Yeah.
I hear open source a lot.
Yeah.
What does that mean, and what does that mean for the buyer?
So open source means we have published the plans for x-carve, all the mechanical files, up on GitHub for free for anyone, for commercial or non-commercial use. And we did that basically as we started shipping. So it's up there. You can click. It's actually on the x-carve page. Mm-hmm. That's sort of compared to proprietary or non-commercial, where the company would like maybe patent the technology. And so that means, as a practical matter for customers, what that means is all the files are available online for the x-carve. So if you want to make a modification or adjustment, you can download the files and pull it in the model and build your thing. And that's actually already happened, where people have started building accessories. Okay. I don't know if you've seen on the forum.
A little bit.
But a couple guys have made like a holder for a vacuum.
Yeah, yeah.
And there's a couple different options. One guy did it with some lock line. One guy just did it with his shop vac. He made a mount. There's another guy who's working on a vacuum table.
That'd be handy.
Yeah. And then there's actually another guy who's working on connecting a robotic arm to the x-carve.
Oh wow!
To do lights out manufacturing in his basement.
Wow, that'd be really interesting to see.
Yeah. So we're thinking about it as a platform that people can improve and use and contribute back to, and so that's why we wanted to make it open and accessible.
Speaking of open accessible, one of my followers, Richard Muller, he asked if there was going to be any sort of lathe options. I'm not real sure exactly what he was going with that.
Sure.
That was kind of the option.
So he's asking for maybe like a fourth axis?
Maybe, yeah.
So we don't have anything in the works on a fourth axis right now, but because it's open source, like you can actually go on eBay and buy a rotary axis, and then you could integrate it into your x-carve if you were so inclined. It's open, okay. And so you can do that. The challenge that he would have is he'd have to find some software that can accommodate that fourth axis.
Okay. All right. With giving the x-carves out to the YouTube creators, and, what type of feedback are you getting from them, and maybe even their followers as well?
Yeah, so initially we thought about, let's just do videos here. And we did a couple projects. And what happens is, like, we think of ideas, brainstorm ideas, and then come up with something. Then when we linked up with some of these YouTube creators, the coolest thing that we saw is, like, they had their own ideas and their own context and their own skill levels and their own way of describing things. And, like, the coolest thing has been just the outpouring of different different ideas and different projects that people have been making, everywhere from guitars
Right.
to stamps to inlays, and I was really impressed. I watched David Pasciuto, the Drunken Woodworker. He did that video where he took a picture of his dog.
Oh yeah.
And he inlaid it into the top of the box.
Yeah.
And I never knew how they made it so smooth like that. And he just put it through the drum sander.
You
And
talking about the epoxy one?
it was the first one he did where he
the
like
very
put
first one.
he put it through the drum sander. And I've never used one of those before.
Right.
But it came out and it was just perfect,
Flawless.
And like he had done a better job using our machine than like I had ever done.
Right.
And I was like, this is so
The
cool.
one I thought was cool of David's was one of his last x-carves.
3D carving.
Yeah. He did I think he put the word, I can't even remember the word now, but
Yeah.
he wrote out a word, but he reversed the print.
Yeah.
And then he sanded through the bottom of it so
Yeah.
it wouldn't explode on him. Basically.
Exactly.
I thought that was just ingenious.
It's genius. And so like Bill Joy, he was one of the founders of Sun Microsystems, a computer company, and he has this saying, the smartest people in the world do not work at your company. Right? Where like if you think of the last 100 years in American companies,
Right.
everybody, it was like the R&D department and like we're doing
Right.
this top secret stuff we can't tell you about, we're the geniuses, and like what the internet has shown is like that's not true. And so we're trying to embrace all these smart people who know all the stuff that we don't know and
Right.
can help find interesting applications and uses.
I had an idea with the x-carve. I'm not a programmer by all means, but what would be or is there plans for mobile devices hooking up to the x-carve, such as an iPad or a phone, or and maybe even doing a simple design on your iPad or phone and just plugging it right into the machine and going?
Yeah, so Easel is built using what's called WebGL, which makes it actually possible that you could load it up on the iPad right now. The challenge is the iPad doesn't have a USB port, so you can't directly connect it to the machine.
Okay.
But on the forum, we just announced early access to the App Store, the Easel App Store. So later this summer, we're going to be opening it up to more developers, and then that might afford someone the opportunity to do something like that.
Now, what about maybe not mobile devices, but SD cards or flash drives?
Yeah, so we're looking into how to support all that. With the Carvey project, we had looked at integrating it into the actual machine, and we decided to cut it based on cost and complexity as a first go around. But we do have some ports in the back that could potentially be used for like a pendant, and then that could also potentially work for something like the x-carve, where you can kind of plug it in and then do like a joystick and then have SD card on the joystick.
Okay.
It's not something that we like are announcing or anything. It's just something that we're thinking about because a lot of people, they don't want to have an extra computer,
Right.
or they want to take their nice MacBook Pro
That's
and
exactly what was rolling through my head.
not have it near their machine.
Right.
So we've been looking at different ways that you can maybe disconnect your MacBook Pro from your machine.
Or maybe even Bluetooth or wireless.
So yeah, so we originally looked at wireless. There's some challenges with people on their own wireless network not remembering the password to get their devices.
Yeah.
So that's the other thing is like not only are we dealing with a 3D card machine, but then all the just complexities of dealing with a computer that might be a little bit outside the scope of just like normal everyday use. So we're trying to just simplify it so it works for everyone.
I got you.
The coolest part of this is like we're getting people from kids to retired folks and everybody in between with all different levels of computer background and experience, and so that's why we're trying to also just keep it approachable.
Okay. What's the coolest project you've seen with the x-carve?
Some of the skateboard stuff that By Andres is doing is pretty cool. And then some of the guitar stuff that we've been seeing is like unbelievable. Like I know that there's going to be there's a bunch of these guys who are like luthiers, like professional guitar guys.
Yeah.
And one of them just posted just how he did the signature of his company in the handle the wood of the handle of the guitar, and I was like, wow,
That'd be cool.
like people are starting to do stuff that is like pro level.
It's definitely gotten me community talking. That's
Yeah.
for sure.
I was like super impressed.
In fact, Maritime Woodworkers, they do a show every weekend, and we mostly just chat, and we try to have a topic that we talk about.
Yeah.
But, this past weekend, it was basically Hot Topic. Is what
Okay.
they called it.
Yeah.
And it was about the CNC machine, and is that woodworking?
Yeah.
We can't decide one way or the other.
Yeah.
So, in your opinion, is it?
Yeah, of course it's woodworking. I mean, you could say, okay, is a belt sander woodworking? Is a
Right.
chop saw woodworking? Is a table saw woodworking? Like, it just
That's
goes on and on and on. Like, is a power drill woodworking?
Right.
Like,
Absolutely.
so-
That's kind of our synopsis of that. It's just another tool in our
It's just
shop.
another tool.
Uh,
And that's the thing that with all the 3D printing explosion in the media and hype and everything, I think some people who are new to this, like they think it's a microwave, where like you press the button and your product comes out, and like that's not like the
Not exactly.
3D printers, laser cutters, 3D carvers, like they're tools, one of many tools. And if you look at anything interesting that's made in the world, multiple tools have been used to make it.
right.
But what I'm really interested in is like, okay, so now all of these folks who maybe use traditional woodworking tools get into a machine like the x-carve or Carvey, or they start messing around with easel. And so what is the mashup going to be, or what like how are they going to use it to augment what they already do? Because it table saws are useful, like to go bzz, bzz, bzz,
Sure.
and now you've got a square. Like you shouldn't be sitting there on your 3D carving machine
Yeah.
doing things that you can do in a table saw in a second.
Right.
So, where is that mix? Like, how are they going to use it? What kinds of interesting detailed engravings? And then from a business standpoint, what is it that this machine can do that a traditional tool can't do, that you can now charge a little bit of a premium for? So for example, we have a couple folks who are doing custom cabinetry, where you can go to the hardware store, the builder store, and buy like the one off the thing. And so the customer was telling me that the family he was doing this for, they had sort of like an emblem that had like historical meaning in their family, and he was able to engrave it
Okay.
into the cabinets. And so that's the kind of thing where it's like they don't have that at the hardware store.
Right.
And so he scanned it in, and
Puts that personal touch on it.
he's like, he couldn't do it by hand. It was like this intricate
Right.
design.
And I think for me, in my shop, I think that's what it would be. I don't know if it would be a machine that I would just set aside and hit play and cut my entire project out. I'm not that guy.
Yeah.
But I can definitely see making a box and putting a name on the top of it, or heart, picture, whatever.
Yeah.
I can definitely see that happening.
Yeah. Lots of customization.
What can you tell me that's coming down the pipeline?
Well, so the biggest thing coming down the pipeline is the Easel App Store. And so we leaked a little bit of that online so far. There's 2 apps in there right now. It's got the Gears Maker and the Image Vectorizer.
Okay.
So you could take, like right now in the proper product Easel, you can just import an SVG. But if you use the Image Vectorizer, you can import any image, JPEG, GIF, yeah. And so what it does is then it converts that into a vector file, and it gives you a little bit of control to decide what it looks like, and then you can carve it out. And some folks on the forum like took to that in like minutes, and almost before the end of the day had
I'd
made.
definitely be interested in that.
Yeah, so there's going to be an explosion of apps as we roll out more access to that, and I'm really excited about that.
With the you mentioned gears.
Yeah.
Will this be a gear generator?
It is a gear
Okay.
generator.
Okay.
So basically, it's in there right now. You type in the number of teeth that you want,
Uh-huh.
and you type in the diameter of the bore, and it just dynamically.
Does it what it?
Yeah, and so if you're an app developer, you should pay attention. Like, there's a sign up list. You can get early access, and then all the developers that signed up during the Carvey Kickstarter are going to get early access.
Oh, cool.
And we have a couple of big companies that we're talking to, who hopefully are going to be doing some interesting things.
Oh,
So we might have some big announcements on that.
awesome. So I think that covers just about everything. I really appreciate your time.
All right,
I'm looking forward to the rest of the building here.
cool.
So
thanks for coming out. Thank you. All right. President Obama announced last week was the National Week of Making, and I was fortunate enough to get invited to go to the White House, and there was a bunch of makers and educators from all over the country that got invited, and the Office of Science and Technology Policy made a request out to help the president, or if companies and individuals and students and schools were interested in making a commitment towards the Week of Making and towards making the country a little bit more 3D literate. And so Inventables answered that call with a commitment to donate a 3D carving machine in every state. So wow. That's 50 of them.
All right. I hope you liked that interview and short tour. I had an awesome time. Michael, Zach, thank you for your hospitality. It was an amazing time. My wife had a great time. And we had a pretty good time just making the day of that short Chicago trip. As most of you know, I'm from Indiana, and Inventables is about 3 hours from me in Chicago. So it was a fun trip, whole day, maybe 12 hours with drive time, the interview, and we had a little bit of time to play around. We went to the Sears Tower, which is now called Willis Tower, and so we checked that out and kind of walked around the little plaza there, and we just had a great day today, and a lot of that was because of Inventables allowing me to come down and seeing them. So thank you, Zach. Thank you, Michael. And I'm really looking forward to playing around with the x-carve. So this is Mike from MFWoodShop. If you have any other questions that I can get over to Inventables, or if you have any questions about the tour or the facility, I'll try to answer as many as I can. Just leave a short comment down below, and I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.